Hello and welcome to the My Wool Mitten podcast. My name is Carrie and I'm coming to you from the middle of the Mitten, Michigan's Lower Peninsula, where I live on a small sheep farm with my family close around me, my little dog Bailey, my old cat Bee, and my old horse Kyle. Today I'm going to talk to you about finishing up our Sock Spin Along 23. Here are my finished socks, some leftover yarns from that and some leftover fiber. I'm going to talk about some other knitting and spinning. Of course, a favorite old book. I've got some ideas about that. And I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about the shearing and the ruing of the Shetland sheep and where we're at with the fiber and the wool. So I hope you'll join me today for just a quick update and see what's happening. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you about that. So let's grab a cup of something good to drink and sit down and have a chat. So here's where I thought I'd give you a little detail about my finished socks for the Sock Spin Along 2023. If you've watched the previous episodes, you'll know that the fiber that I chose was a Finn sheep alpaca blend that ended up having just a little too much alpaca. So I did run it through and add some Corriedale wool to it so that there was a little bit more of an even balance. The white in the socks is Angora bunny, and Corriedale, a little bit of Corriedale in that, just to kind of hold it together. The toes are bunny toes, which is a blend of Angora bunny and wool. And let's see, what else could I tell you? When I did the blending, of course, my yarns came out slightly different colors. And actually, one sock is quite a bit lighter than the other sock, but that's okay. This is inside out and you can see no ends have been woven in on this one, but I've been wearing these socks and some of it's just felted right down already. Now I know some people that kind of texture bothers their foot, but doesn't bother mine. I did use Amelia's. I loosely based these on a pattern by Amelia of Amelia Style, her knockin sock pattern, and the white Angora was from Amelia. And so I wanted to dedicate that to her. And so I switched it up a little bit. I talked about that in previous episodes, but I did really like her little cuff detail. And I used that and it was super easy and I like the looks of it. So I might do that again. This is my little journal where I like to keep notes about my spinning and knitting. I have the yardage, I think, written down somewhere, but I may not. But I did weigh the socks and they weigh just under 4 ounces. The height from the back of the heel up is 6 inches. And I mentioned on Instagram that I've worn these a couple of times. I wore them for shearing and I wore them for an Easter get-together at our roundhouse cabin. So I wore them across the wood plank floors. They're comfortable. They stayed up. They kept my feet warm. And I'm really, really happy with them. So that's my finished pair. I've already started spinning for another pair, and although we mentioned that the Sock Spin Along was going to finish up on April 17th, I usually like to have something going. I don't always get a second pair finished, but I like to have something on the wheel that can be a sock if I need it to be. What else might I say about this? Just that I enjoyed doing this again. Oh, and this is not a dirty table. This is an old barn table, so there's paint chips and stuff on it. I was just looking at it and thinking, gosh, that looks dirty. Anyway, that was a side note. What else can I say about these? As always, they were fun to knit and spin. As always, it was just a delight to do this project with you guys. I've appreciated all of the comments and the interaction, and I hope maybe we can do it again next year or later this fall. These are the yarns that I have left over, and I have a plan for these too. And I want to talk to you about that in a few minutes. A way that we could use up our yarn. Maybe you spun a yarn and you didn't like the idea of it for socks. It was too heavy, it was too thick and thin. And so I have an idea that maybe can keep us on a roll for spinning and working with our sock yarns. Other details about the socks. I used both size 3s and size 4s. I cast on and worked my way up to, 46 stitches. And I did toe up, I did a mock short row heel, and I did these on double pointed needles, knitting them both at the same time, but on two different sets of needles so that I would work, like 10 rows on one sock, 10 rows on the other sock, excuse me, so they would finish at the same time. And so I think that's the only other details to share about them. Well, and on to the next part of our podcast. I'm sitting here wearing my what I consider my podcast sweater because I do wear it quite often when I'm podcasting. And that is this one of the two sweaters that I have knit out of Nutedan yarn. And this is one of my favorites. My voice is a little bit scratchy today. I You would laugh at me. I was transferring some bulk spices from a plastic container over into glass, not even thinking. And it had some pepper and some allspice cloves, that kind of stuff. And I just got a whiff of that and got to coughing and sneezing, and so I'm still a little raspy sounding. So I hope I don't sound too bad. We'll play this back, and I have some tea here, compliments of a friend that I'm sipping on. So hopefully I don't need to slurp on that while I'm talking to you. But while we're talking about Nutedan and a sweater, I want to show you something um, that I've mentioned occasionally, and that is my daughter's new sweater that I've been making for her out of Nutedan. I'm going to hold it up in front of my face. We'll see how this looks. I'll kind of scroll it up. I'm hoping that you're seeing that okay. So I finished the body. I thought I had it finished and she wanted it a little bit longer, and so we just kept going, and it's long enough now. This is where the steek will be. So now it's time to start on the sleeves. Really, really, really happy with it. And I can't wait till she'll be able to wear it. Maybe I'll put a picture in of it laying on the table so that you can get a better look at it. But I just wanted to update you on that, as well as we talked about the socks just a moment ago. And so what I wanted to talk to you about next is how did you find spinning the yarn? A few of you have mentioned that it was maybe a little bit thicker than you wanted to have for socks, or it was a little thick and thin, and I hope you're not discouraged by that. But I thought if you don't want to knit socks out of that, or if, like me, you have a basket full or a little basket full of leftovers from your sock yarns, because I experimented a lot with mine and I ended up with some kind of different colors, a little bit different thickness and twist. So I had some left over. And so I thought, since we're coming to the end of April and going to be coming into the beginning of May, what if we, in the month of May, knit a pair of mittens? And if you haven't already spun the yarn, you could spin the yarn for a pair of mittens. Mittens are infinitely more forgiving than socks, I think, because they're going to fit somebody. And if they're a little too big, well, you put another pair underneath. If they're a little bit tight, if they're knit out of wool, you can kind of stretch them out and block them out. And I always harken back to probably one of my all-time favorite books, which might be showing in the wrong direction for you, but Elizabeth Zimmerman's Knitter's Almanac. And if you have this book, you'll know that for the month of May, she says, why don't we make mittens so that we have them ready for winter? Um, yeah, she says, let's make mittens in May. Take our time over them, venture into new approaches and designs. Let's enjoy them. So let's think about doing that. Would any of you like to join me? You know that my handle is My Wool Mitten. That's what I'm known as. I live in the middle of the mitten, which is Michigan in the United States. So mittens are a big part of my wool journey and my wool life. And I think that we never have enough mittens. You make them up, you can give them as gifts. And so I think that I would like to start on the 1st of May, either spinning for some mittens, or if you have some hand spun yarn, let's knit some hand spun mittens. And I want to show you one mitten. And you can see kind of the change in color. It's on a mitten blocker that was made by Patricia of Knitography Farms. And here is my cup logo. Did any of you know, some of you do know, maybe some of you don't, that I actually wrote a mitten pattern? Not exactly a pattern, but a mitten recipe. And I had it on my old farm blog years ago, just kind of the steps of how I make mittens, and this little cup logo that is nothing special, just something that I kind of jotted down and charted out. I've used it on socks. You may have seen some socks that I put them on the toe. It can be a teacup, it can be a coffee cup, it can be a hot cocoa cup if you want it to be. But a few years ago, some friends in the fiber and yarn community reached out to me, some very dear women. I'm not sure if they want me to say their name, but some people I feel very blessed and lucky to be associated with and to know, and asked if we could publish this pattern. And they put me in touch with Jess of Wool Gatherers Knits, who is a extraordinary, what's the word that I want? Well, she's a tech editor who also happens to have a fiber mill now, but put me in touch with Jess, so I got to work with Jess, which she made very easy for me. I had no idea what I was doing. Jess made it very easy, and my only thing was that I wanted this mitten pattern to always be free, offered for free, and I call this the Share a Cup Mittens. And if you were to make these, I have asked that maybe you would consider making a donation to a food pantry, maybe even a donation of a good brand of coffee or some nice tea or hot chocolate, and think about how mittens, to me, represent our hands and sharing and helping. And in these times, even more so than back when I came up with this pattern, that's a very, very true thing. It's something that we need. So let's think about making mittens. Let's think about people who might need a hand, whether it's just a hand of friendship, a hand of love, a hand of encouragement, a hand up, whatever. But I thought that might be a fun thing to do for May, maybe a meaningful thing to do for May. And you don't have to knit this pattern. I'm just mentioning that it's out there. And it is free. It's on Ravelry if you can use Ravelry. It's also, I'll put a link to my old blog. It's still there. And that's a very wordy, because I am a very wordy person, but it's a very wordy, chatty, step-by-step way of doing mittens. And just like with socks, I'm very loose and relaxed with how they're done. I just jotted this down for what fits me. You can go down a needle size, you can go up a needle size, thinner yarn, thicker yarn, change a few stitches. The pattern as it's written, I have the detail on the cuff, but here I did it at the top. And I like an afterthought thumb because that fits me very well. Some people don't like an afterthought thumb, so if you don't like that, just plug that little pattern detail into your favorite basic sock or mitten pattern. So this is my rambly, not very organized way of saying, would you like to join me to spin for mittens or to knit for mittens in May? And let's have some mittens ready for this winter. This also works very well as fingerless mitts, and I talk about that on the blog, on the farm blog. So I'm going to put those links down below for you, and let me know if you might be interested in doing that. And if you're not going to do my pattern, which like I said, you certainly don't have to, then let me know what pattern you might be doing. If you already have a pair of hand-spun, hand-knit mittens in progress, then feel free to continue on with that. This is no prizes. This is very loose and just encouraging, and I hope it makes us think about what our hands represent in this world. So there's that. There's that. So let me pause for just a minute and talk about the next thing I want to mention to us. I'm going to pause just for a minute. So continuing on with knitting, I want to talk just briefly again about Angora bunny fiber. I have had the chance to work with some amazing Angora bunny fiber here recently. Of course, my friend Renee at Tailspin Farms, who's local to me, that's where I tend to purchase bunny fiber because I don't raise Angora rabbits myself. Amelia from Amelia in Style sent me some of her Angora bunny all the way from Sweden, and that's what I used in my socks. That's the white that you saw. It's a contrast in my socks in our Spinning for Socks 23. The tip or the toes of those, my bunny toes in that particular one was with Angora from Renee. Now I also had the chance to sample some Angora fiber from Michelle in Canada. And Michelle, I'm not going to attempt to say your podcast name because I probably will say it wrong. And I apologize. I tried a couple times, but I think I really said it wrong. So I'll put the name on the screen and I'll also link to Michelle down below. And she sent me some lovely Angora fiber from her bunnies to try. And so I've been playing around with that. And so there is some of that in the tip of my mitten. And in the thumb of my mitten, because I thought the same as that Angora blend is keeping my toes extra warm, the tip of my fingers and my thumb that tend to get cold, wouldn't that work well for that? So I did want to invite you to, if you haven't before, maybe try spinning Angora for your mittens for some part of it, if you have access to some Angora. And let's kind of make that a little personal challenge if you feel like it. But I wanted to give a shout out to Michelle. She's going to start selling some of her Angora fiber. So if you are in Canada, near to Michelle, I was very happy with the fiber that I got from her to try. Very pleased with it. The color was gorgeous, and the length and the crimp. It was a lot of fun to spin. And so I'll show you some of that. Maybe not today because I didn't bring it over here. I'm sorry I'm looking around because I'm looking at Angora fiber over here. I'm looking at some Shetland wool over here, and then my knitting that's here beside me. And also Michelle sent me a sample of a tea blend from her garden with some herbs and different flowers and stuff. And so I thought that's what I'll drink today as I'm speaking with you. Also, she hasn't been able to podcast much lately because she started a new full-time job. But Michelle has a neat podcast if you want to go back and look at some of her episodes. Knitter, spinner, gardener, all around interesting, neat lady. And so you might enjoy seeing that. I also wanted to mention a couple of other podcasts. And one is Amanda at Coastal Wool Washing. I think I've mentioned her on Instagram before. I don't think I've mentioned her on my podcast. But I really enjoy Amanda's podcast. She just tells it like it is, and she's inspiring, and she's excited about fiber, and she's started a small wool washing business. So that's very interesting. But the reason that ties into Angora is that I didn't realize, Amanda, that you had taken part in a challenge of spinning Angora. I think it was last year. And I'll link to that episode down below where there was a challenge for people to sample Angora and spin it. And so that was really fun to watch, and I enjoyed that. So I'm going to link to that down below also and mention Amanda. Two other podcasts I want to mention, and I guess I don't think about referring you to them because I assume that if you're watching me, you're probably watching these two women, their podcast, but maybe you don't. And if you don't, you're really missing out. And so I'm going to mention, among many others that I watch, but these are two that have a very large following. But if by chance you don't follow along with them, please go and check them out. And one is Lisa at the Soulful Spinner. And a lot of people have found Lisa because she's been doing a breed study. I've referred her a lot of times if people are doing drop spindling and they ask me about it. I am not a drop spindler or a support spindle person, and Lisa has a wealth of information on her podcast. She's a retired teacher, so she comes by teaching us on her podcast very well. And so if you don't already follow Lisa on Instagram and YouTube, I'll put the link down below, and please go and check her out because you will enjoy it and you'll learn a lot, and she's very encouraging. So That's one that I want to mention. Another one, and this is a fiber related and a small farm and small flock um, person who champions that area, which means a lot to me and speaks to my heart, and that's Brittany of Crux Fibers. Crux Fibers, is that how you say it, Brittany? Yes, I'm pretty sure. And her low mileage wool. First of all, I think that's the most clever name for a venture with local wool and shepherds. Low mileage wool. I just loved that. And she is just so inspiring and so encouraging. And if I were closer to her, I'd be snapping up fibers left and right, or yarns, or if I didn't have a ton of my own already. But so if you get a chance to go and watch her, I know she's busy. She's going to be doing some fiber shows here coming up. But if you can follow her on Instagram or go and check out her YouTube channel, uh, just it's so exciting to see people take on this challenge. If they don't raise the sheep or the wool themselves, that they're seeking out and encouraging shepherds to make use of maybe an undervalued resource. So go and check Brittany, go and check Lisa, go and check Amanda, and of course there's lots of others, but those are three that I wanted to mention today. So let's see what else is going on in my fiber world. I wanted to talk to you in today's episode about the fleece and the wool that I've been working on from the Shetland sheep and the Corriedale sheep, but I'm running short on time and I want to give it the time that it deserves. So let's save that to the next episode. Would you guys come back and talk to me about that some more? And we'll discuss it? I'd like to see you do that, or have you do that, and allow me to give it a little bit more time. So I think we'll end this podcast or this vlog here. And if you're interested in joining me to spin and knit for Mittens, let's, on Instagram, let's use the hashtag Mittens Spin Along. And I'll put that here on the screen somewhere. Our other was Sock Spin Along, so let's just call this Mittens Spin Along. So I hope to see you there if you're interested, and if you're not on Instagram, I'll share about that here on the podcast channel. So thanks again for being here. Like and subscribe if you don't already, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.